All right, all right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rewilded Wellness. I have Dan Kittredge here with me today. Super stoked to chat with you. So glad you're here. We've got a lot to talk about, don't we?
I think so. I hope so. Looking forward to the conversation, however it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, so really quick, I just want to share with my listeners. It was a year ago, someone introduced me to you and your work with the Bionutrient Food Association and what you're up to, how you've been touring around teaching for a long time. And so I checked out the YouTube series, which I believe anyone can find and check out as well if they wish,
Yep.
to learn. I learned a ton, was super stoked. Love that you're very philosophical. He kind of called you a philosophical farmer, if you will, right? And that you just cover the spectrum of topics. And so I really appreciated that series, started implementing some of what you taught on there and have been kind of following you, watching ever since. So really quick for people, the Bionutrient Food Association is what is
Uh,
sum it
what
up.
are we? What do we do?
Yeah.
I think our one-liner is our mission is to increase quality in the food supply. And by quality, we started off talking about, obviously food, as in like the physical substance. And we're talking about flavor, aroma, nutritive value, increasing the nutritional value of food as our objective. Currently the supply chain thinks about quality as aesthetics, uniformity, et cetera, not on nutritional caliber. And there's a really big, there's a big variation in nutrient levels in food. So, according to the government, all carrots are uniform, all beef is uniform, all milk is uniform, all rice is uniform. That's why you get that number on the back of the package that says there's so much, vitamin D or so much protein or whatever. And that's not from testing the rice or the beef. That's from an average that they built 10 years ago or something, and it gets put on all packages. And what we're saying is, um, if you've had a tomato off the shelf in January and a tomato out of the garden in August, as an animal that there is something different about those two tomatoes. And that different thing is nutrient variation. There's a massive nutrient variation. It's like 5 times or 10 times or 20 times, depending on what the nutrients we're talking about. Like this tomato will have 20 times as many antioxidants as that tomato or something. So there is a massive nutrient variation in food. It correlates directly with our noses and our tongues experience of flavor, which is amazing. Like nature, God, whoever you want to call it, evolved us with the ability to see what's good for us and what's not. It correlates directly with soil health and plant health and farm viability and pest and disease resistance and not needing fertilizers and insecticides. And we think with your children eating their fruits and vegetables because they taste good versus spitting them out because they don't, and your health and chronic disease, and whether we need agribusiness or pharmaceutical industry. So it's a kind of an exciting nexus point, we think, like the nutritional value of food. So our mission is to increase the nutritional value of food. And we do that by supporting farmers and growers of all scales in learning how to work with nature, because basically it's only when you work with nature that you get better results. If you use the colonized mechanistic frameworks of fertilizer and things like that, then is when you get the negative results. You might get better volume, you might not, but you definitely don't get better flavor and nutrition. Um,
Yeah.
and we've been doing a lot of research in the last few years, documenting the variation in nutrient levels and building meters to test it and all kinds of other stuff. So yeah, it's a lot, but that's
It's a
probably
lot.
enough to start with.
It's awesome. Yeah, okay. So I did not know that it was just like put on the packages. I mean, I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was that bad.
Well, the way it works is like every 15 or 20 years, they'll get 10 carrot samples from across the US, usually like 10, maybe six, maybe 15. They'll get like one from Arizona, one from,
Wow.
Washington, from Iowa, one from Florida. They'll like go to a grocery store in a state in a part of the country. They'll take a sample, they'll bring it to a lab in Illinois. They'll test it for a few compounds, few nutrients. They get rid of the highs and lows, they find the average, and that is what's in a carrot on the bag until 20 years later when they redo it. And that's the way you get the number on the back of the package, is not from testing, the thing that's in the package,
Wow.
but a very, very small sample set at one point in time, 10 or 15 years ago, potentially, and averaged. And so it's like saying there's an average human. Is there an average human? I mean, could you average out a human and say they're all like this? They all have this much intelligence. They all have this much vigor or vitality or emotional capacity? No. So why do you think there's an average carrot or cucumber? It's like it's completely ridiculous, but it's
Mm.
part of the structure of our society right now. That's yeah.
Well, that's
Anyway,
good to know and setting, but also just drives us more, right? Like oh, yeah. So because of the work that I do, which is working with people and helping them with their nutrition and like recover from chronic health and doing this whole HTMA, the mineral test, I'm looking for the most optimal mineral rich foods, right? And man, is it a pain in the butt to figure that out because the research, it stinks. Um, and so yeah, so that's good to know. And it's
there is no average in anything. You can't say you should eat this or eat that. You can't say it should be organic, it should be local, it should be biodynamic, because just like there's a variation in humans, there's a variation in biodynamics and a variation in organic and a variation in local. And most people aren't properly healthy, and most local food is not properly nutritious. Most organic food is not. And so the,
right.
the, the issue is that we have this mistake of thinking that if we can find a box like Methodists are God's gift, and all other Christians just aren't quite as cool. But if you just find a Methodist, they'll be a better person. No, no, Christians aren't better than Buddhists, or Buddhists aren't better than Jews. Like it's like we have these boxes that we put things in, and we sort of think we can judge a whole spectrum of food or humans or whatever by this one box, like organic. Like
Right.
it's not true. It's just not true. But we do have these God-given things called noses and tongues, which are the things that tell us what's true.
Mm.
And that's what connects, is the flavor with the nutritional value. And we do have some really simple meters, like that have been around for 150 years, that cost $20, that you can use. I call it refractometer. There exactly, you have one, which is exceptionally good at discerning the relative quality of food. And it can be quite, depressing when you get the bag
Oh,
from as a member, or you go to the farmer's market and you start testing the stuff, and you're like, this farmer's market stuff is basically the same as the grocery store stuff,
no.
and that's, sorry, but it's in many cases the fact. So I'm here in Australia right now, and we just did that. We just went to a local farmer's market, bought a bunch of stuff, went to the grocery store, bought a bunch of stuff, came out and tested it all, and like, yeah, uniformly poor is the nature of the supply chain.
Wow.
So this is the issue, is that after 3 or 4 generations of
Yeah.
being fed the products of industrial ag, before you even talk about the processing of it, if you just eat food that's been grown with fertilizer, it is nutritionally devoid. And if your grandmother ate that, and then your mother ate that, and then now you're eating it, and then your babies are eating it, epigenetics is going to tell you that your babies are going to be in rough shape,
Yeah.
because you just have in your body what it needs to function. And that's what we're trying to focus on, is helping farmers understand how to work more well with nature to get those better results, and then help people who buy food understand, like, look, it's in your best interest to choose the thing that's more flavorful. Anyway, yeah.
No, it's super huge because yeah, we are degenerating and honestly, and I've been doing this for a little over 10 years and it's getting worse. Like people are a wreck and
Yep.
kids, like I have young men in their early 20s coming to me on their own of their own accord,
Yep.
hiring me, like which is unheard of, right? Like
Young men in their early 20s coming to you of their own accord. That's an amazing statement. That's an
right?
amazing,
Yeah.
and it's true. I mean, we are degenerating systemically, and people know that something's wrong, and they don't know where the answer is, but they're pretty sure it has something to do with the food.
Yeah.
And so that's our idea. If we can figure out a way to give people the ability to test if you've got 3 bags of carrots to choose from on the grocery store shelf, or 3 jugs of milk, or 3 steaks, whatever it is you're buying, if you could flash a light basically take your camera on your phone, flash a light at this one, that one, and the third. And you get a reading back on your phones. One says 20 out of 100, one says 40, one says 80 out of 100. I think a lot of people would take the 80s and leave the 20s.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for sure.
Foundationally, what we're trying to work on is to get that done. And we're
Get that meter done. Yeah, I cannot wait for that meter. I know you put it on hold because you're working on the data to make sure it's accurate and
It's a
um
research project. It takes millions of dollars of science to
yeah.
come up with the answer. And because we're a nonprofit, it has to be done with charitable donations.
Yep.
And we're not a company, so we're not trying to lock it all up and
Yep.
profit off it. We're going to do it openly. So yeah, we need about $20 million in research money to figure it
Yeah.
out.
Well, that's one of the reasons I
Not
wanted
a
to
lot
talk to
for the
you.
whole planet, but
Right. I want to see this as succeed because I'm super into it. And I'm totally going to use my meter and learn from this as while you're doing all this. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about like so because one of the things for me was years ago, because of the mineral work that I'm in, we had a couple plots at a local park, you can $20 a year, whatever, you can go and you can grow. We snapped up a bunch of those. And my dad was like, "Hey, let's test the soil." I found this guy in New England who does soil tests this like years ago. It was harder to find that stuff then. And we sent it in got the mineral profile, mended it, yada yada. This guy had all these videos of like how like there was one plot of land that remineralized and amended their soil, and the bugs would like jump off it and go over to the neighbors because they were like, "No, we'll go over here. This is like
yeah,
easier for us to." Right. So it was like really cool to kind of see some of those stories of like how when the food is healthy because the soil's healthy, it's not susceptible to pests, right? And I think the same
yeah,
is true in our body. This is my whole like spiel is like fix the terrain, like increase the quality of your inner terrain, and you're going to be, well, not invincible, hopefully, but like less susceptible to
a
all.
hell of a lot more so.
Right. So the same is true for the soil, and then which is important for us, right? So that's part of the terrain is like we gotta go back to that piece, right? And bring in the
Yeah.
minerals, which is what you taught in your series that I was so fascinated by. And I'm just growing on a small scale level here. I just have a little tiny urban garden. So it's a little easier in some regards, but I can't wait to take what you've taught. So where would you tell people, because not everyone listening is probably a farmer.
Mhm.
What's like some of the first stuff we need to do to really make our soil rich?
Well, so it doesn't really matter what the scale is. You can have a few pots on your back deck, or you can have a 5,000 acre farm. The principles apply regardless of scale. Um, and the basic point is that plants were evolved by microbes to feed them. So microbes came first, and they evolved plants to feed them. So when you think you're growing plants, you're missing the point. It's about creating a dynamic where the microbes can flourish. And
Mm,
where the microbes flourish, the quote unquote higher organism will flourish. It's the same as animals. Animals were evolved by microbes to reproduce them and to feed them and to distribute them across the ecosystem. They came first. The vast majority of the cells in our body are not human, they're microbial, right? The vast majority of the cells in the plant are not plant, they're microbial. So the first thing is to understand that we're working to create an environment where the microbes are going to flourish. And so every dynamic is unique. Every piece of land, soil, etc., it has different balances and imbalances. And there is no silver bullet, as in you can't just add compost tea, or you can't just add limestone, or you can't just add compost, because different environments have different imbalances. So the first thing is every piece of land is unique, and you need to treat it like it's unique, and you need to treat it like it's a living being, because it is alive. It's not a chemistry set, it's a living being. And so the more sensitive and loving and caring you are, and I truly do believe that like intention is a big piece of this puzzle. It's not just the chemistry and biochemistry and microbiology and physics and biophysics. It's actually heart and love and compassion and intention. those are actually real things that really do matter. But staying on the sort of the hard Western sciences side, you have to have air in the soil for the microbes to breathe. You have to have water in the soil for the microbes to drink. You have to have food in the soil for the microbes to eat. You have to have minerals in the soil for the microbes to build their bodies out of. You have to have the microbes themselves in the soil to be able to, exist and reproduce. And so, when I teach my course, which is like you said, on YouTube for free. It's just look it up on YouTube, look up Dan Kittredge, and you can download it as 12 hours. I walk through these principles and look, here's the basic dynamic. Here's like 8 ways of solving the air issue. Here's 12 ways of solving the water issue. Here's 15 ways of solving the mineral issue. So it's not like you have to do this or this, but understand for life to function, she needs these basic things. And your job as a farmer, gardener, homesteader, land steward, whatever scale or identity you've got is to, sensitively, thoughtfully, and in relationship with the land, make sure she's got what she needs. And then go take a nap, play with the kids. Uh, you know,
You can have in the garden.
I went anywhere and everywhere, but but it's not about having to work, right? It's because nature is designed to work. It's just that we've abused her so much that she's having a hard time. And so, um, I mean, indigenous cultures globally have shown us that humans can manage, ecosystems at continent scale with no wheel, with no plow, with no, beast of burden. We have the capacity as humans, thoughtfully and respectfully in relationship with nature, to facilitate amazing vitality and fecundity. But it has to do with us being in right relationship with and in service to, not in trying to control. And you don't need PhDs. We didn't have any PhDs until quite recently, and humans for a very long time were doing brilliant work on the land. So it doesn't have to be all heady. In fact, the more you can get into your integrated, deeper self, the more you're going to get that guidance directly from the land, and you're going to know what needs to happen. It's not about reading a book or listening to a teacher or following a religious framework of, pray 5 times a day or do, 5 Hail Marys. It's literally about a direct relationship with the land.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a multi-level conversation, but air,
Yeah.
water, food, minerals, life, these are some basics that if you don't have any of those things, pretty much, it's not going to
Right.
work.
Right. It's the foundations. I have what I call 7 pillars. So it would be sun, light,
Yeah,
air,
obviously you need sun, and warmth is good too. You need
right?
warmth
Like sun and
because if
light,
it's cold out, these things aren't going to work.
air, the right airs and breath. So
Yeah,
like the soil is most soil is so compacted and not aerated.
sure. It's not soil. Yeah.
Water, obviously, movement. So I guess that means the airflow and the water in the soil, like the whatever's moving in the soil would that correlate to soil too? Because that's a human
All
pillar.
kinds of things. You get the mycorrhizal fungi, hyphae, and if you look at with these with what are the scanner electron microscopes, like you can see the little things shooting back and forth in the hyphae, like at really fast speeds. The microbes are shooting back and forth. It's like a super highway, and nutrients are flowing back and forth. It's a web. It's a beautiful symbiotic web of life under there, where there's just people. And I mean, what do they say? There's more organisms in a teaspoon of healthy soil than there are humans on the planet. Like literally, it's an amazing ecosystem down there. There's tons of people, whole lives and communities and cultures are there everywhere.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
it's alive, if
If
it's
it's,
alive, things are working. If it's dead, it's dirt, and things aren't working. And that's
yeah.
when you produce these substances, which are called food, which basically don't have a good flavor, which your kids will spit out because they're animals and they know better. Um, so
Oh man.
yeah,
How many parents have told me my kids won't eat vegetables? I'm like, well,
because they're crappy. Because they're crappy, because they're animals, because they know better. Give them a high quality carrot, give them a really tasty, anything, a good one, and watch them. Just stick it on the.
yeah,
First is you get
no.
your refractometer, and you got to find an excellent cucumber. Good luck finding an excellent cucumber. But if you do, and you cut it up and you stick it on a plate on the table and don't say anything, and a kid unconsciously takes a bite,
Right.
they'll take another bite
They'll
and then
go
they'll
for
eat.
more. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it has to be high quality to begin with. We
Yeah.
have this mistaken understanding that all carrots are uniform. It's not true, guys.
No, carrots suck. I
A
cannot,
lot of them,
I can't eat
but some of them are
any
amazing.
carrot. They taste like chlorine. They taste bitter. They're
Yeah.
not good. Once you've had a good carrot, you just forget it. You don't want another carrot ever. Like, forget
Or a
it.
beet or a cucumber or anything. Like
Anything.
cabbage. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and I love all vegetables. Like, there's not a vegetable I could say that I don't really like. Maybe a couple that aren't in my favorite, but I already like veggies, but when you get a good one, it's like
When you get a good one, you like it. When you get a bad one, you don't.
it's
That's the
just
thing.
wow.
You've tasted a cucumber that's no good. You're like, you
Yeah.
know, like you don't want to eat it. And that's what our
The
kids do. And the
texture,
thing is,
most cucumbers, their texture is just like weird to me. Not I
but a
haven't
good one is different. I mean, and that's the thing is we have to, this is what we started, that we created this word nutrient density to refer to this variation in nutrient levels in food. Because, when I started this work in 20, I don't know, oh 07, oh 08, there was no word for this. There was no word for this variation in nutrient levels in food. I came from the organic background and we kind of knew we were better because we were organic and other people weren't. And the permaculturalists are pretty sure they were better. The biodynamic people knew they were better, but like it was like, we're organic, you're not. This
right,
religious, like in crowd,
right,
out crowd, mentality.
right.
And our and you know, but we weren't willing to say some organic is exceptional and a lot of organic is crappy.
Yeah.
And is there variation within organic and is there a variation within local? And so that's why we created this word nutrient density, to have this conversation, was to begin to, unpack this idea that kids don't like vegetables. Well, kids don't like bad vegetables, and most vegetables are bad and some vegetables are good. But you need to understand, you can't just say kids don't like vegetables, because that's not quite true. If you give them the good ones, they'll eat them. Um, but it's a
Yeah.
whole conversation we have to open up and we have to
Yeah.
unpack and we have to watch our words, and the real problem is finding the good stuff. It's so hard. It's so
It
hard.
is. It is. And so back in 2007, I found nutrient dense food through the Weston Price movement, right? Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions. I was
Yeah.
pregnant with my fourth son. My friend gave me the book. I had already been on the saga of like trying to figure out what the heck nutrition was. Like, like I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand. I'm trying. I really am. And it's just like crazy out there. And that made a lot of sense to me when he's, Weston Price studied all these ancestral cultures. And I feel like in that movement, they do a good job of teaching some of the principles, but where I felt like they were lacking was in the plants, because we have this whole movement of like ancestral nutrition out there, but all they talk about is the animal products primarily, and they really don't get into the plants a whole lot. And we've been dissing on the plants for a while in in the nutrition scape, like blaming the plants for a lot of things. And so it's exciting to me because what the research you're doing and the work that you're doing is like helping us come to terms with the plants again in a more thorough manner, because we can't even compare our modern vegetables to like whoever Weston Price studied. Like, how could we possibly, right?
And
Like,
we shouldn't compare our milk and our meat to what Weston Price studied either, because when you feed a chicken grain, or you feed a pig grain, or you feed a cow grain,
right,
what's in the meat or the eggs or the milk is not good for you. You
right,
can't say lard good, because if you fed a pig grain, that lard has balances of compounds in it that are not healthy for you.
right.
So the Weston Price is using the Weston A. Price Foundation is using the term nutrient density in the way that food science uses the term nutrient density, which is to say all carrots are uniform, all rice is uniform, all Coca-Cola is uniform. And they'll say there's more nutrients per calorie in carrots than there is in rice. So it's more nutrient dense. And there's more nutrients per calorie in rice than there is in Coca-Cola, so it's more nutrient dense. So there's a really important conversation here about the term. I like to use the example of organic because when I was a kid, my parents told us we were organic farmers. And so I said, we're an organic farmer. I'm an organic farmer to my science teacher. And this was in the 80s. And she said, organic means contains carbon. All farmers are organic farmers, you silly child. Because at that point in time, there was no organic certification label, and organic was organic chemistry. There was no other word for organic. And so it meant compounds containing carbon. Then
Mm,
there came along a food movement, which said, we think that synthetic chemicals, et cetera, are bad. And so we're going to try to differentiate ourselves from people who are using synthetic chemicals in their food production. And we're going to call ourselves organic. And that food movement burgeoned and grew and developed certifications. And the government came in and took it over because it was getting so big. And now when you say organic to people, the first thing they think about is certified organic, not organic chemistry. Those are both the term organic, but they mean entirely different things. So nutrient density is exactly the same. Nutrient density used to mean something, still does mean something in food science. It means average nutrients per calorie, and kale is considered to be uniform. Blueberries are considered to be uniform. Rice is considered to be uniform. That's part of the false matrix.
yeah.
So I would say Weston Price is foundation is using the term nutrient density in that matrix of thought. They aren't saying there's a massive differentiation between this milk and that milk, between this lard and that lard, between this butter and that butter. They're saying butter good, lard good. And what we understand is how you feed the cow and how you feed the pig have a
Right.
massive effect on the milk or the lard that you get out of it. And I talked to Sally about this, and she doesn't want to talk about it. She's just not interested in talking about it. She's got her story and she's stuck on it, and that's great. She's done a lot of amazing work in her career. But when you get into these simple religious good bad dynamics as opposed to a continuum, like this is 80 out of 100, this is 40 out of 100, this is 20 out of 100. I think you know I think progress is going and saying there's nuance, there's gray, it's not black and white. And
Complex. Yes, 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 yes.
it's simple when you get down to it, but you have to get out of this black and white us them paradigm
For
and
sure.
into like it's everything somewhere in the middle of the matrix of the continuum, right? It's so
Yeah.
anyway,
So,
yeah,
so, all right. So we're doing the real build back better by fixing
real
the
build back better. Yes,
The real
exactly.
build back better by fixing the soil, right? So I want to talk about that because I love it so much because it's literally what I'm trying to do in human bodies, which is tricky, right? Like, let's fix your terrain, not easy. Everyone's different. You know, we're hearing you're supposed to get X amount of protein per pound of body weight, all these ridiculous things. Someone can't digest it. It's just so convoluted and crazy, right? To try to figure out nutrition in these times. And so to me, it's like, let's just increase your gains, right? So we got to go relearn a bunch of stuff. Um, but the problem is we don't have the best materials to work with in the first place, right? So,
Oh,
the next pillar that I was going to talk about was food and nutrition, right? So I heard you in another interview and you were talking about, I don't know if you were talking about the breakdown of a carrot perhaps or something like that, which I think you have some cool breakdowns on your website, which people should definitely go check out. Some reports, the wheat and
yeah.
oat one, the 2020 report, the beef one, this different stuff, which is cool. But my point I'm getting at is like we've favored these like protein. How much protein does it have? How much calcium does it have? We have these like higher macronutrient ideas, right? That we're all talking about. But then you get into when the soil is really working right, you're creating a plant that has all these antioxidants and all these other compounds that we're only just now talking about because of how they play a role in the microbiome, right? And like what they do to feed our microbes, polyphenols and, you
Yeah.
know, flavonoids and all this cool stuff. which now everyone's taking pills of instead
Yep.
of getting it in their food. Right. So, like, to me, that's where I find the nuance and complexity super cool, because it's like, forget the supplement. Like, let's just get the soil happy and the food happy. But I would love to hear you expound on like something and help people understand like the potential that
Yeah.
not connecting that like full.
I got a few comments on that topic. Um, I mean, for starters, we spent a bunch of years sampling the supply chain. We got people to send in samples from across the US and across Europe for years of 25 different crops, you know, roots and leaves and fruits and grains. Like for starters, it was just plants. And we got them from the grocery store, from the farmer's market, from the CSA bag, from the, you know, farm stand, from the backyard garden. And we said, send us in the food that's ready to be eaten. And we wanted to survey, we like, what's the variation in calcium in cucumbers or in apples or in potatoes? So what's the variation in zinc in all these different crops, wheat and blueberries and radishes, polyphenols? Like, what's the scale of variation in of nutrients in food? And the thing is, every carrot, of course, has like 10,000 compounds in it, or maybe more, depending on how deeply you look. And so you can't say like this or that. It's a whole matrix, right? So simplifying it and saying I mean, it's like we do such a horrible job with these like uniform numbers. It really perverts our thought. But what we
Mhm.
wanted to do is like, how big is the variation? And across the board, all the things we looked at, when you're looking at things like calcium and potassium and sulfur and phosphorus and zinc, all the different elements, it was between like a, you know, a 2 to 1, 5 to 1, or 10 to 1 range, basically. So like this carrot will have 8 times as much phosphorus as that carrot, like literally 8 times as much phosphorus per 100 grams of carrot in this one as in that one, 8 to 1, or zinc might be 4 to 1, or sulfur might be 4 to 1. So that's big, right? That's big. Like this carrot has 4 times as much as that one in this nutrient. And that was with blueberries, and that was with apples, and that was with wheat, and that was with potatoes, and that was with Swiss chard and lettuce and, you know, whatever, leeks. When it came to the complex compounds like antioxidants and polyphenols, those things which we understand are like very health giving, like the anti-cancer, anti-chronic disease compounds, it was more like 20 to 1 or 40 to 1. So this carrot has 40 times as many antioxidants as that carrot, or 20 times as many polyphenols as that carrot. And that's a correlates with flavor. That's a correlates with health giving attribute. We've been taught that blueberries have high levels of antioxidants in them, right?
Right,
And that's what
right.
blueberries are, a high antioxidant fruit. What we found was there's this massive scale of antioxidants in blueberries. And in many cases, per 100 grams, there was more antioxidants in potatoes than there were in blueberries,
Wow.
because so many blueberries had such low levels of antioxidants. It's
Wow.
like there's all kinds of, you know, samples of oranges that have very, very low levels of vitamin C,
Right,
right?
right, right, right.
Like the reality is oranges can have lots of vitamin C, but based on how they're produced, a lot of them don't.
Yeah.
Blueberries can have lots of antioxidants, but based on how they're produced, a lot of them don't. And so you can't say blueberries have high levels of antioxidants. You can't say, you know, acai berries or you know, what I mean, pomegranate or whatever necessarily have high levels of antioxidants, because if they were raised with fertilizer and chemicals, they don't. The only way you get those high levels of those really health beneficial nutrients is when you've got a healthy living soil. So that's the first thing, is that variation we found is massive. Um, the second thing is, and I think this is a really important point, like as I understand it, like we'll just there's 2 points. One is vitamins. We'll just do that one first. Like, um, if you take a soluble nutrient and you know, basically inject it directly into the bloodstream of that plant, you can cause that plant to grow to have high levels of that nutrient in it, whether it's nitrogen or zinc or phosphorus. But
Mm.
it's easy to get excess, right? Those things, when you get excess, is in many cases what causes the problems to occur. Like the pest pressure and disease pressure will happen because pests and diseases are nature's report card, basically telling a farmer, don't eat this. This is not fit for you to eat. So I'm going to bring in my garbage crew to remove it from the ecosystem. So it's not allowed to reproduce. Like unhealthy plants, nature has a way of keeping unhealthy plants from reproducing because she doesn't want to have, unhealthy babies. And because they're not going to be able to function. And so she sends in the report, the garbage crew. I like to say a flesh-eating fungus is not a sign of health. Being eaten alive by larvae is not a sign of health. If your child or your cat or your dog was being eaten alive by larvae, like there were maggots eating the flesh of your dog or your child, you'd say something is really wrong. When it's happening to your potato plant, you say, how can I kill the larvae? Because I want to eat that potato.
Right.
Understand, a potato being eaten alive by larvae is nature's, garbage crew coming in to take it out so it doesn't reproduce. So we don't make the mistake of eating the potato from that unhealthy plant because it doesn't have in it what our bodies need to function well. And so, we have this perverse dynamic going on where we think that we know better and we think killing insects and disease is just sophistication on our part where we can optimize, yield. Well, lots of yield of empty nutrition causes us to die out. So we have to get that through our thick skulls.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you can add nutrients, extreme levels of individual nutrients to an organism. But if it doesn't come in a biological matrix, if it doesn't come in the format that we've evolved to eat it, it's going to have potentially quite negative repercussions.
Yes.
Because we were able to make tests of people's blood 50 years ago and see there's these variations in zinc and copper and iron, and we could see what looked like there were appropriate levels, doesn't mean that coming in and adding one thing is going to solve the problem, right? Identify imbalances, but then we need to understand what's nature's path of building balance. And nature's path of building balance is not adding a ton of one thing.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so it's like that with nature. It's like that with the plants. I laugh when people juice and I'm like, so you're taking a carrot and an apple and spinach and you're putting it through a machine and you're taking out all the soluble nutrients basically and all the stuff, all the stuff like just take a minute here. What percentage of the cells in your body are human? 10 or less percent. Who eats first? The microbes eat first. So when you remove all of the fiber, the substance from the food, because you think you're feeding yourself, you're missing the foundational point that you're not a human, right? You are an ecosystem. You are a symbiotic ecosystem of multiple species of multiple kingdoms. And when you remove the food for the bottom of your food chain, for the people in your colon, when those people in your colon are being starved because you've taken their food away, because you think you're being really sophisticated by making juice, you're setting up imbalance. That's like adding soluble nutrient fertilizer to your plants and thinking they're going to do well when plants evolve to eat through the function of the microbes. And only when you've got nutrients coming through the vector of microbes should you expect plants to be healthy. So when you try to put nutrients through the vector of soluble nutrients of these unnatural forms, whether it's vitamins or juices or things like that. I mean, sure, in extreme cases, imbalances can be, addressed immediately or whatever. But like, if you want to look at a systemic solution set, like how to properly rebuild system function, this is where the Weston Price stuff is really powerful. This is where the understanding about the microbiome and electric fermentation, whether it's the kimchi or the sauerkraut or the sourdough bread and all that kind of stuff is really, really important, is understanding that foundationally we are an ecosystem of symbiotic relationships across multiple kingdoms, and we have to engage ourselves that way. So yeah, in my mentality, like you use your body as your instrument of scientific perception, your scientific tool. You try eating this and you see how it makes you feel. You try eating that, you see how it makes you feel. You try, it's not just beef, it's this beef versus that beef. It's, it's not just bread, it's this bread versus that bread made this way with this grain. It's not just dairy, it's this dairy versus that dairy. Is it grass fed? Is it raw? Is it lacto fermented? Not just, is it dairy? And
Right.
you go through the process of actually letting your body tell you by how it responds with its vigor and vitality, and also what you've got cravings for, right? I mean, if we can take the junk out of the equation and say
Right.
that's junk, and so we need to just like have some basic self-control and say,
Right.
obviously not involved, but start with a balanced diet of relatively whole foods and say, today I feel like I want more carby stuff. Today I'm really feel like I just want to chug milk.
I just
Today,
want to-
like the truth is the
Yeah.
answer to your body is in your body. And it's not in somebody who has quote unquote is famous and has the credentials and is has a slick Instagram page, right?
Right.
It's in your body. The answer is within, and you need to understand that and look to nature for the patterns of whole things, well made. Look to our ancestors for, what was done for millennia for how things worked.
Yep.
Yeah, I think in many cases it's really simple. It's really inexpensive. The answers are within, and so you know you have to
Yep.
engage that process. You can't sort of outsource it and just, you know, I'm going to pay somebody who's really expensive to, give me all the answers and I don't have to worry about it. Like, no, you actually have to go through an internal process. And and the reality is, like, if you want good food at this point in time, like it's really hard to buy it. It's really hard to buy it. You might actually have to change your lifestyle where you're in a process of growing your food. I mean, actually, if you went through the process of deeply engaging, like consciously with your food, like putting your seeds in your mouth and having a prayer and saying, connect to me. And you're gonna, when you are born and you germinate and you're gonna go through your life of making your carrot or your tomato or your onion to feed me, thank you. Like that
Mhm.
onion plant will grow into its bulb the nutrients your body needs, right? The modulation in nutrient levels in carrots and onions and apples and blueberries and echinacea for you that will heal you most well will only happen when you actually are in conscious relationship with that plant through its entire life. If you do that, your food will actually be what you need. The more you can go there, the more deeply you're willing to engage that reality, the more rapidly your healing process can occur because you're actually connecting profoundly with nature. And it's just something you can't outsource, you can't commoditize, you can't, I mean, you can try, but I don't think that's the way forward. I think it's an entirely different
Yeah.
path.
That's beautiful. And that's one of my pillars is connection. Recon
Yes.
Reconnecting with
Yeah.
source, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
There's love and fear. Love is the force of coming together, and fear is the force of separation. And that's that's a foundational duality. What brings us
yeah,
together is love and good, God, whatever you want to call it, nature.
yeah,
And what separates us is fear, is,
everything else.
devil,
Yeah,
is, I mean, we've got our metaphors in religion,
right.
or, you can talk
Yeah,
about the positive pole and the negative pole, north and south in a magnet, repulsion and attraction.
yeah,
These are foundational forces. Um, and what causes you to come together causes you to feel good, right? Coming togetherness feels good. That's actually the answers are within. If something doesn't feel good, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel hurt or say or scared, like that's the thing that's telling you it's wrong. The
yeah,
feeling, we actually have these scientific instruments of perception that are profound. We don't need external things like microscopes and telescopes because the meter we've got for perceiving on multiple levels we're carrying around with us every day.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
anyway,
No,
yeah.
I love it. It's perfect. And you said it's simple, and it is. However, some we have so much conditioning, right? Like that's where I think
Mm,
people get tripped up
tons.
is until
Yeah.
until you choose in your own, like you just have to choose to return to nature in some way. It doesn't matter
Yep.
what it is. Like just start going back. Just start going back slowly. Just do something, right? Like when I started learning foraging, I've always been, my parents took us out in the woods and my dad grew food. So I have some understanding, of collecting food in the wild and whatever. But when I learned foraging, I didn't expect that part of like that intimacy of like that connection of like the plants are my friends. Like we can communicate with each other, right? Like,
Yep.
and they're like I like go up to them and I like cuddle with them and talk to them and and I'm like, oh, you want me to have you today, don't you? And I'm like, I guess I need you. And I'm like, is that cool? Can I take some of you? And I go home and I'm eating this plant and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And then I might, because I'm a geek, go try to look up like, well, what does this plant got going on, and like
Mhm.
whatever research I can find, because it is hard on the wild plants, by the way, which is super annoying, but
Yep.
usually the materia medica is pretty good if it's in there,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it's like, holy moly, like, you look at some of the wild stuff and the nutrient profiles, it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, there's so much more in here than these crappy cultivated, you know.
But if you cultivate a plant well, it can have those epic levels of nutrients in it,
Yeah,
right? That's the thing, is if you work with nature, I mean, nature can be flourishing in a human engaged ecosystem. It's not like humans bad, you know, like it's like how we engage the process is what's good or bad.
yeah,
But I think foundationally, what you're saying about this reconnecting with nature, I'm using this metaphor right now of denaturing versus renaturing.
yeah,
Like we are denatured.
yeah,
Like we think about foods being denatured or whatever, but like when you remove yourself from nature, when you build yourself into a box with a
yep,
completely controlled environment and you raise your children on screens indoors, without these nuanced dynamics of living systems in direct perception connection to them,
yeah,
they become denatured.
yeah, yeah,
Becoming denatured, do it for long enough and you're gonna die. You're
yeah.
gonna die.
It's
It's may not happen in your generation, it may be your next generation or the one after, but
yeah,
like it's the trajectory as we separate ourselves from nature is to die out because that's what evolution is. That when you stay in harmony with nature and you maintain coherence, then you flourish. And as you leave that coherence, as you become denatured, you die out. And
yeah,
it's so simple.
yeah,
But we have to take responsibility for our lives because the structure of culture we've got right now is not trying to support our reconnection to nature. It's trying to support our wage slavery and our, being cogs in the industrial wheel and our needing to have money to provide our basic livelihood because we're so incapable of providing for ourselves. Um, and massive profits are accomplished through that, economic profits for a small few, but it doesn't facilitate the wealth of culture and our own vitality and fulfillment. And
yeah,
as long as we are passively carried along in the stream of that trajectory, we should expect ourselves to die out and become incoherent and culturally, you know, dissolute. It's on us each to take those choices for what we think is true and right, and not look to master, whether it's a political master or a corporate master or whatever for our answers. The answers are within. The answers are within, and that's what and when we find those answers, we need
hmm
to trust them and act on it accordingly and not don't allow yourself to be distracted and whatever. Good luck.
yeah,
But I think that's where we need to be looking.
yeah,
um
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
and
Yeah,
it's all there. It's all there and it's freely available to everybody.
it is.
um and it doesn't cost any money. It just takes commitment and intention.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Arthur Hayne calls it nature divorcement. And what's interesting is that when I've just been studying the microbiome, there's actually this really cool study. It's called the built environment microbiome, which is literally a completely different microbiome than what we're supposed to
Yeah.
have. And so it's fascinating because when people have the built environment microbiome,
Yeah.
it's like, say someone lives in New York City.
Their terrain is entirely different, right?
And
Yeah.
so then they try to go and eat like wild food. their body's like, wait, what? Wait, what are you giving me? Like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, so it's like we do have to reawaken the nature within us, um, and recreate that like inner terrain by doing that.
By
And
getting out of the city, by occupying the land, by unplugging from this dominant life force sucking matrix, right?
yep,
I mean,
yep,
if you actually want to have grandchildren, you need to raise your children in a way for them to have connection to nature and vitality and vigor. Because if you don't, your kids aren't going to be able to reproduce. Some of them aren't going to make it. I mean, we're getting to that point in culture now
yeah.
where we got kids that are sick and dying, and it's not okay, but it's happening all around us. And I call it profound child abuse to, put kids in front of screens and separate them from nature and, remove them from, the what it's just it really is it's really is perverse. It really perverse what's going on in culture. And the thing is, nature is what is the dominant paradigm. That is the reality within which we live, and we can try to divorce ourselves from it, but it's not gonna. Yeah, I mean, we're being shown what happens if you do that.
Yeah, because if you stay in the nature divorcement and you try to get healthy, what you're going to end up doing is what all the marketed to you stuff is telling you need to do, which is pile on the supplements. All right, guess what? We now found out that we're supposed to get fulvic humic acid. Oh, this is so amazing. We found this out. Let's make it into a supplement. And here now you need this, and then you need this, and you need this, and you need this, and oh my God, it's insane, right? So that's the world that I'm in, is like trying to help my people be like, hold on, wait, back
Yeah,
up a second, back up the bus, like here's how you could get it potentially and save yourself some money and like some stress about like now that you think you need 52 supplements. And that to me is a disservice in my industry, that a lot of people are doing, is like perpetuating this paradigm by
well,
throwing
if it's become an
supplements.
industry, that in and of itself should tell you something.
Yeah.
Right? How did traditional cultures do it? What was a medicine woman? What was a medicine person? I mean, they were wise and deep and lived in close proximity to nature, and they used whole things.
Hmm. Yep.
And each person was unique and was assessed deeply on multiple levels before the appropriate whole things were identified for them. If
Hmm.
you just go across the board and say everybody needs this, oh, by the way, and I'm going to make a ton of money off of it, and I'm very charismatic, and I'm very, got a great marketing campaign. Like,
Right.
the thing is, we've been trained since childhood to sit still, shut
Mhm.
up, and repeat after the person in front of us. And that's, I mean, that it's yeah. I mean, you can yeah.
It's a problem. So, I'm just over here like, what's the trendy supplement of the month? And I'm like, all right, well, how do we get this? Like, how would we have gotten this? Like, what's going to happen if we isolate it and put it in a pill and it's all by itself,
I
apart?
just don't even bother listening to or talking to or being part of those conversations. For me, as soon as you're paying attention to this, you know, incoherent matrix, you're putting your energy into that. For
Yeah.
me, focus on what you understand to be the solutions, and don't and put your attention there, and amplify the thing that you think is real, and support those who are curious and hungry for it. I used to be an evangelist. I used to be like, I've got the answer. Listen to me. The truth is over here. And like, I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think the right way to do it is to do your work and speak, humbly and wholly. And those who are curious, and resonate will find you and share that understanding. But pushing, and fighting, um, at least for me, I don't know. It's not any fun, actually. It's not fulfilling. What's much more fulfilling is to have deep conversations with people you feel alignment with, and to, share that and welcome people into that circle. And like I say, build a new sandbox. Don't fight the old,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
don't even bother with the old sandbox.
Exciting.
Just build a new
Build
sandbox and
your own
invite
thing.
people to come play in this sandbox where it's where it's more fun. Yeah.
Way more fun. Get out of all of that. It's exhausting. Yeah, I just want to give people context from my perspective when they ask these
Yeah.
questions about these
Yeah.
subjects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm like, here's a whole picture. Let's look at this
Yes.
holistically for real. Like, even though you think that's holistic, they're saying it's holistic. It's not holistic. But I guess my last thing, because I'm so like I love getting into the more esoteric side of everything, but maybe this isn't quite there. So we talked about intention, we talked about like the relationship. I'm sure that also too, like there were things we did long ago that we don't do anymore. Like, so I'm sure the plants are getting stressed by all the EMFs and
Yep.
all that electro pollution and all of that stuff too.
Yep.
And like I feel like the ancients figured out that obviously they didn't have this level of what we're dealing with, but I think that they had some cool environmental protection
Yep.
mechanisms at play. Like, do you get into that at all with your work? Yeah,
100%. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, structured water and coherent fields and harmonics and overtones and octaves and yeah, I mean, there's if we can project dissonance into the ecosystem, we can project coherence into the ecosystem. And there's a whole other conversation there, which is, can be understood in the physics, but is not quite so much right there on the physical plane. But, I mean, the physicists tell us that 95% of reality is not on the physical plane. So, you know,
right.
so, but
Energetics. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, energetics and all that kind of stuff. So structuring water and I mean, there's a deep conversation there, and that's certainly part of what I go into in my course. I like to start off with a bunch of physical plane stuff, and I only teach things that are, where there's a peer-reviewed published paper to say this is a legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate scientific thing. But what's exciting is Western rational peer-reviewed published paper science has shown that a bunch of this esoteric stuff is real.
yeah,
It's not just the protons and neutrons and electrons and microbes and stuff. That is also proven in the papers and the literature and the scientific literature. The scientific method is a beautiful thing. The scientific method can be used to discern many things, not just stuff on the physical plane, right? It's cause and effect. Scientific
right.
method is like do this and this happens, do it again and it happens, do it again and it happens. You begin to have a theory, do it every single possible time and it happens as a law. Like the
Yeah,
scientific method is a method of discerning the nature of reality, which gets us out of the religious dogma of I think and you think. And it's like trial and error and what happens in reality. And so there's an immense amount of stuff there, which is completely exciting, which I love to get into. But I try to start off with the physical plane stuff first to build, because that's like the agreed reality we all have. And then actually secretly we all have these internal thoughts about things which we don't necessarily feel always comfortable talking about. So I get into
like
that on
yeah, like
second,
singing to your plants.
singing to him, talking to him, you know, consciously or out loud or not out loud, Yeah. Do
Yeah,
you talk to your dog, or do you talk to your baby when
right.
your baby was young before it understood words? I mean, the thing is, like, what do they say, dogs and kids? Like, you can't fool them. If you got a bad attitude, the kid's gonna cry and the dog's gonna bark, right? It's not about the words you use, it's about the vibe you hold. And
Mhm.
I think the vibe you hold is basically what makes a green thumb or a not green thumb. And yeah, it's it's not about transplanting the plant. It's about how you transplanting the plant, or that's also a big piece of it. And holding that plant gently versus just grabbing it by the stem and yanking it actually has a massive effect.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, like yeah, it's like the idea of like the being the consumer and taking, right? Like versus like the co-creating and being in harmony with nature. Like it's two completely different things, and we've been trained to be consumers.
well, I mean, yeah, but you can still pray over your food and you can still cook with love. And the intention you put in while you're, over that frying pan is massively important. you know, like
Yeah.
if you're cooking with love, you can take what was relatively incoherent and make it much better. There's a massive, massive thing that anybody can do there. I mean, if you're just buying something off the out of the freezer section and putting it in the microwave, it gets a little more difficult. You know, you got to have some pretty strong ability to pray to bring that back. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I'm just saying like your consciousness capacity has to be strong
Gotta work
to
harder.
counteract the dissonance. You know, it's easier if you start with something you grew and were engaged with, and you're cooking over a fire or something to
Yeah,
have that all
yeah,
function. It's
yeah.
all the pieces, all the pieces.
All the
Are you
pieces.
cooking with anger? You know, if you're gardening with anger, if you're out there and you're just pissed and you're just like weeding and just picking, but you're angry, like that's horrible. It's completely horrible. You know, like it's
Yeah,
your whole way of being all the way through is
sure.
part of it. So anyway, this has
Yeah.
been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I so appreciate you taking the time, and it was great to chat. And last but not least, where should people can find you at the Bionutrient? Say it right. I'm Lydia.
Well, there's two websites. There's a bionutrient.org, which is the general
Right.
organizational website, and bionutrientinstitute.org is where we have all of our science stuff.
Okay.
Um, we've got, YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all that stuff too. So people who want to get engaged on the social media stuff, we don't do a hell of a lot there, but there's a ton of stuff on YouTube. Our YouTube channel's got hundreds of hours of stuff. So I do all kinds of podcasts and webinars. And so if you go on our website and you look around, you'll find a bunch of stuff. Um, yeah, I think Spotify, I've got a Spotify channel. So there's like 50 podcasts on there. The idea is basically we're an educational organization, and we try to share these understandings as broadly as possible, as freely as possible for as many people on the planet as possible. We're not a company, we're not trying to maximize profit. So
Yeah, and people can join,
resources available if people want them. Yeah,
and then people
sorry.
can become members as well, and
Yes,
contribute
yes, yes.
in whatever capacity they choose, which I did do that, which is where I'm
Thank you.
learning some of the stuff. And I also got my meter.
Yeah.
I know that you have chapter groups. I reached out about
Yep.
that as well. So I'm super excited to see where that goes. And
Yep. No, we're an educational organization. We run on donations. So $5 a month is great. $55 a year. That's a basic membership, but that's great. If people can afford more, we love it. The deeper work of defining nutrient density is a process that I think I said at the beginning costs a lot of money. And so our thought is if we can get to a point where you can flash a light at the 3 bags of carrots on the shelf, or the 3 steaks, or the 3 jugs of milk, and see one's 80, one's 40, one's 20 out of 100, that's going to be very empowering to people. And
yeah,
that will help drive, we think, systemic solutions in agriculture, because it'll inspire the farmers to focus on soil health as opposed to, chemistry. But to get to that point is an expensive science project. So those who have the capacity to support us, the more support we get, the faster we'll get it done. So
yeah,
yeah.
excited. Can't wait to see how it goes. So
Great.
cool, cool, cool. Well, thanks for the convo. Appreciate you. And I guess
Yes.
wrap it up and say goodbye so you can keep on conversating with more people.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy the conversation, and maybe we'll have a course that happens down there in Virginia, and I can meet in person.
Yeah, somewhere on the East Coast. I'll be there.
All right. Sounds good.
All
Great.
right. Take care. Thanks so much.
Bye.